Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a stack of compelling sources and extracting the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight, tailored just for you.
That's right. From global diplomacy to scientific breakthroughs and some interesting economic puzzles, our mission is to help you cut through the noise.
Exactly, to help you get truly well informed. So let's unpack this. Okay, our first deep dive today comes from the editorial section. It's looking at the whole geopolitical landscape as it's evolving. And specifically, it talks about this surprisingly deep relationship between India and Europe.
Yeah, it frames it as quite compelling, actually, saying that in this world that feels increasingly marked by, disorder and divergence, this partnership is sort of standing out, a case for diplomatic renewal.
Diplomatic renewal. Okay, so how does the article explain this shift? What's driving it?
Well, a key idea here is how it portrays the global chessboard, so to speak.
Yeah.
It talks about the transatlantic realm, traditionally anchored by the U.S., feeling a bit adrift.
Adrift. Why adrift?
It points towards former U.S. President Donald Trump's iconoclasm. Basically, his tendency to challenge norms, his skepticism towards NATO, even disdain for traditional allies.
Right. I remember that causing quite a stir.
Exactly. And stepping back, you can see how this connects to Europe pushing for what they call strategic autonomy. That used to be more of a French idea, but now you hear it echoed in Berlin, Warsaw, Brussels, pretty much everywhere.
Okay, so Europe's recalibrating because of this feeling of being adrift. How are we seeing that play out? And crucially, where does India fit into this picture?
Well, you see signs in things like discussions around France potentially extending its nuclear umbrella, or Germany significantly boosting defense spending. It's a real shift.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you have India, its foreign policy, historically non-aligned, right? Now it's moving towards a more, let's say, assertive multi-alignment.
Multi-alignment. So engaging with multiple powers actively.
Precisely. And the deeper insight the article offers is that this emerging world order isn't just about the superpowers anymore. It's increasingly shaped by these aspirational middle powers like India and Europe. They're finding common ground, championing a multipolar world based on international law, shared values. It goes beyond just, strategic convenience.
So it's a partnership of conviction, not just convenience. That's a strong statement. What about the economic side? Does it mention specific examples?
Oh, absolutely. The economic ties are, well, quite striking. Get this.
Yeah.
Between 2015 and 2022, EU foreign direct investment in India jumped by 70%.
72%.
And France's investments alone, they skyrocketed by 373%. It's huge. Plus, EU imports from India have doubled in just the last 3 years.
Wow. So it's not just talk.
Not at all. And it's not just about basic trade either. They mentioned the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, IMS. The article actually calls it a modern Silk Road.
A modern Silk Road.
For what exactly? For trade, yes, but also enterprise, energy, innovation. It's framed as this transparent, sustainable alternative, kind of an answer to infrastructure demands in the Indo-Pacific.
Interesting. Beyond physical infrastructure.
Definitely. They also talk about digital architecture as public infrastructure for the global good, covering everything from tech innovation and governance to clean energy and biotech. It's quite broad.
That sounds like a really comprehensive vision, but how do you sustain something like that across different cultures, vast distances?
Good question. The article stresses the need to invest in human mobility. Think comprehensive agreements for students, scientists, scholars. The idea is to build up talent pools, fertilize innovation, create this virtuous cycle of collaboration.
Okay, so people-to-people connections are key.
Exactly. And it all ties back to this idea of shared custodianship of a rules-based order, resisting those simple, hegemonic binaries, empowering the global south. It also calls for getting past old stereotypes, aligning perceptions. The real takeaway is that this partnership isn't just reacting to global instability. It seems to be about proactively shaping a different kind of world order, a more balanced one.
Fascinating. Okay, from that global stage, let's pivot now. We're moving to a pressing domestic challenge here in India. Our next deep dive, also from the editorial section, tackles this paradox concerning women in STEM careers.
Ah, yes, the STEM paradox.
Exactly. The article highlights that an incredible 43% of India's STEM graduates are women. That's apparently the highest globally.
Highest globally, yeah. But
here's the catch. Only 27% of them are actually in the STEM workforce. That's a huge gap. It's really perplexing.
it truly is a paradox, especially when you look at the bigger picture of female labor force participation, the FLFPR. The latest survey for 2023-24 shows it's up overall to 41.7%, which is good news, right?
Sounds positive, yeah.
But here's the nuance. When you break it down, the increase is way sharper for rural women, 47.6%. In urban areas, it's only 25.4%.
Oh, okay. That's a big difference. Why?
Well, the thinking is that this urban disparity, where more formal jobs like STEM are located, points to some serious barriers. Things like workplace safety concerns, societal expectations, they really impact women entering these formal sectors.
And what about the economic side of this? The article mentions some pretty staggering figures.
Yeah, the economic stakes are immense. McKinsey Global Institute estimated that getting about 68 million more women into the workforce could boost India's GDP by up to $700 billion by 2025.
700 billion, that's enormous.
It is. And the World Bank had a similar angle, suggesting that if female workforce participation hit 50%, it could lift GDP growth by 1%.
So we're not just talking about fairness or equality here, though that's crucial. This is a major economic issue.
Exactly. It really challenges you to see it not just as a social justice issue, but as a core economic imperative. This untapped potential is effectively a drag on national growth and innovation.
Right. Now, the government has tried things, hasn't it? The new education policy, boosting industrial training institutes, increasing the gender budget.
Yes, several initiatives are mentioned. The NEP 2020, revitalizing ITIs. The gender budget allocation did increase from 6.8% to 8.8%. There are new schemes for women entrepreneurs, too.
But the article says industry is the missing link, despite these government efforts. What's holding industry back? What are these barriers?
It points to these persistent social norms. Ideas like mechanical means masculine, or coding isn't for girls.
Ugh, those old stereotypes.
Exactly. And they're not just sayings. They create real, though often invisible, barriers. They contribute to unwelcoming workplaces, sometimes a lack of awareness even within families about the opportunities for women. And then there are the deeply ingrained gendered roles that can push women out of STEM, even if they graduated in it. Studies show it's often not about ability, it's the environment.
That's disheartening. So the environment needs to change. How can industry actually bridge this gap then? What solutions does the article propose?
It really puts the onus on industry, suggesting things like structured mentoring programs, training that's directly linked to industry needs, and much stronger partnerships with educational institutions.
Practical steps.
Yes, it gives the example of UN Women's West STEM program. That includes things like engaging families, running workplace safety sessions, and importantly, introducing female role models in STEM.
Role models are so important.
Absolutely. The core message is really powerful. When a woman earns, her influence, her voice, it echoes through society, through industry. It helps create this blueprint for a future-ready India.
So the insight isn't just about gender equality.
Right. It's about unlocking this absolutely crucial engine for India's future economic health and its competitiveness on the global stage. The article basically asks, can industry afford not to invest in women's STEM careers?
A very pointed question indeed. Okay, let's shift gears again. We're moving now to a very complex and frankly contentious issue. Our third article is from the opinion section. It's titled The Mirage of the Two-State Solution. It's written by the ambassador of the state of Palestine to India. And his argument is, well, it's provocative. He says the two-state solution is maybe the only surviving relic of the peace process. Other phrases, he argues, have kind of faded.
An only surviving relic. That's a strong way to put it.
It is. He notes that the UN General Assembly Resolution 181 back in 1947 called for two states. But, he says, in reality, only Israel actually came into being.
Okay, so what's his core argument then?
Well, here's the striking part. He asserts that there is a two-state reality on the ground today, but, he claims, both states are effectively Israel's.
Both are Israel's. How does he explain that?
He describes the first state as the one declared in 1948 on about 78% of historic Palestine. The second state, he argues, is what he calls a de facto Jewish messianic state, or a halakha state, governed by Jewish religious law. And he says this second state is rising on the remaining 22%, the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967. He even says it has its own militias, budget, political structure, ruled by something called the Yesha Council. Wow, that's a very different framing, a parallel state being entrenched.
That's his claim. He says there's been a carefully crafted system of legal documents, military orders since '67, all designed, in his view, to solidify this second state and make the internationally backed two-state solution obsolete.
And he gets quite critical, mentioning genocidal rhetoric.
Yes, he strongly criticizes that phrase, specifically citing the current U.S. ambassador to Israel, reportedly claiming there's no such thing as Palestinians. It really highlights the incredibly deep divisions in how this whole situation is perceived.
Definitely. So, given this perspective, how does the ambassador see the role of the international community?
He basically says the international community is at a crossroads, facing a moral test.
A moral test. How so?
He draws a really stark comparison. He points out that over 16,500 sanctions have been put on Russia, but he argues there are no meaningful sanctions against Israel, which he says continues to get unconditional military and intelligence support.
Okay, so he's challenging the consistency of international actions.
Precisely. The deeper insight he's pushing for is a challenge to the impartiality of international law and accountability. He's asking, essentially, why different standards seem to apply in different situations.
So, based on this analysis, what does the author believe is the way forward? What's the only path to peace, according to him?
His call is strongly for accountability. He suggests tools like economic sanctions, arms embargoes, diplomatic pressure. He argues the world needs to stop treating Israel, in his words, as a state above international law, or like a spoiled, reckless adolescent. He concludes that accountability is the only path to peace.
And he frames it as a kind of final warning.
Yes, he suggests this might be a final warning against letting the conflict descend into endless war. It's crucial, of course, for our listeners to understand that this segment conveys the specific viewpoint of the ambassador of the state of Palestine to India, as presented in the source material. It's one critical perspective on a deeply complex issue.
Understood. Okay, moving from those geopolitical complexities, let's turn our attention now to the cutting edge of science. Our next deep dive is from the science section. It tackles an ancient problem locust swarms, but with a potentially very modern solution.
Locusts. Always a fascinating, if terrifying, topic.
Right. Their destructive power is just immense. The article mentions that just 1 square kilometer of swarming locusts, that's about 40 million of them, can devour as much food in a single day as 35,000 people.
That's staggering. And we saw that huge infestation recently, didn't we? 2019, 2020 across East Africa, Pakistan, India.
Exactly. A record breaker. Which makes finding better solutions really critical, especially since traditional synthetic pesticides have, major drawbacks for the environment, land, food security.
Absolutely. The search for eco-friendly alternatives is key. So what's the new science here? Well, this is where it gets exciting. There's groundbreaking research from the Chinese Academy of Sciences published in Nature. They've identified a specific pheromone. It's called 4-vinylanisolol, or 4-VA for short.
4-VA, and this is the key.
It seems to be the pheromone that triggers the mass swarming behavior. The mechanism they figured out is quite neat, actually. Locusts eat, then they emit this 4-VA from their hind legs. That smell attracts other locusts. Then, when they get close, they rub their legs together, which triggers a release of serotonin.
Serotonin, like the happy chemical in humans.
Sort of, but here it acts as a trigger for the change in behavior, and that leads to the full-blown swarm. It's a specific chemical cascade.
Okay, so if 4-VA is the trigger, can they stop it? Interrupt that pathway somehow?
That's exactly the idea. The researchers dug deeper. They found that a compound in plants, phenylalanine, is what triggers the locusts to produce 4-VA when they digest it. And crucially, they identified 2 specific enzymes, let's call them converter enzymes, that are essential for turning phenylalanine into 4-VA. 4-VPMT1 and 4-VPMT2 are their technical names.
Converter enzymes, got it. So can they block those?
Yes. And this is really compelling. They used genetic engineering CRISPR, actually, to deactivate the gene for one of these enzymes, 4-VPMT1. And guess what? The locusts stop transitioning into their gregarious swarming phase. No swarm.
Wow, genetically blocking the swarm. That's amazing. Is there another way besides genetic modification?
They found one. They identified another molecule, for nitrophenol or 4-NP, that can physically bind to these converter enzymes. It essentially gums up the works and blocks the production of 4-VA.
Okay, so 4-NP could be sprayed, perhaps? Is that a practical solution? Are there downsides?
Well, there's a catch, as there often is in science. 4-NP works, yes. But nitrophenols, the class of chemicals it belongs to, can be toxic, and they persist in the environment. They're used in other industries, and they can be hazardous.
So not ideal for widespread agricultural use then?
Probably not on its own. It prompts that question of real-world application versus lab success. But they did propose an alternative, using RNAi insecticides.
RNAi, what's that?
It stands for RNA interference. Basically, these insecticides target the specific genes for those converter enzymes. They prevent the gene from being expressed, so the enzyme protein doesn't get made in the first place.
So it stops the process before it starts, and it's highly targeted.
Exactly. Much cleaner, potentially much safer for the environment. It really represents this shift away from just broad-spectrum chemical warfare against pests towards these highly targeted, maybe even eco-friendly biological interventions. It could set a new standard for sustainable agriculture, not just for locusts.
That sounds incredibly promising. So what's the overall strategy they're proposing now based on all this?
They've outlined a kind of 5-step comprehensive strategy. It's quite clever. First, use 4-VA substitutes chemicals that smell like 4-VA to lure locusts into specific trapping areas for localized control.
Okay, trap them.
Second, maybe spray actual 4-VA in some areas, but to prevent aggregation. If the smell is everywhere, it might confuse them or act as a deterrent.
Interesting. Use the attractant as a repellent.
Kind of, yeah. Third, monitor locust populations by detecting 4-VA signatures in the environment. Fourth, potentially release genetically modified locusts that can't swarm as a form of biological control to dilute the swarming tendency.
Introduce non-swarmers into the population.
Right. And finally, combine these approaches. Maybe use small molecule regulators, like a safer version of 4-P, along with existing biopesticides for a multi-pronged attack.
Yeah, that's a very thought-out, integrated approach. Seems like a big step forward for managing this ancient plague.
Definitely. Aiming for sustainable, pollution-free locust management. It's a significant development.
Okay, from tiny chemicals controlling huge swarms, let's switch to macroeconomics. Our next piece is from the text section, and it dives into what it calls India's investment conundrum.
Ah, the investment puzzle, yes.
Right. The economic survey for 2024-25 apparently noted that the corporate sector has, financially speaking, never had it so good. Profits are up.
Sounds great for them.
But corporate investment is lagging. It's sluggish. And this seems puzzling, especially when you see things like the index of industrial production hitting a 9-month low, growing at only 1.2%.
Yeah, that does seem counterintuitive. High profits should mean high investment, right? That's the usual assumption.
Exactly. But this article challenges that. It brings in, interestingly, a kind of old-school economic debate referencing figures like Rosa Luxemburg and Tugendbaranovsky.
Oh, the Marxist debate on accumulation. Interesting angle.
Right. Their core argument, drawing on this, is that investment depends, first and foremost, on the demand for the goods it produces. It doesn't just happen automatically because profits exist.
So demand leads, profits follow. Or rather, investment follows demand, not just profits.
Precisely. Individual firms, the article argues, base their investment decisions on assessing demand. If they don't think people will buy more stuff, they won't invest in making more stuff, even if they have the cash.
And Luxemburg's point about coordinated investment.
Yeah, she apparently argued that collective investment would help the system overall, but, quote, coordinated or collectively planned investment is an anathema to capitalism. Individual firms act in their own perceived interest based on demand. Okay, that makes sense. But the government has tried to stimulate investment, hasn't it? Big corporate tax cuts, pushing government capital expenditure, CapEx, the RBI cutting interest rates.
Yes, all those measures have been taken. Significant efforts.
But the article suggests they haven't fully worked to boost private investment. Why not? What are the nuances?
Well, it points to a few factors. First, gestation lags. Big infrastructure projects, which make up a lot of government CapEx, just take time to show results and create follow-on demand.
Okay, patience is needed. What else?
Second, some of that government spending might leak out through imports. If the machinery or materials for a project are imported, it doesn't directly boost domestic demand as much.
Right, the money goes overseas.
And third, the labor intensity matters. If these big projects rely heavily on machines and not many workers, they create less employment. Less employment means less consumer spending power, which dampens overall demand. It becomes a cycle.
So it's not just about making money cheap or available for companies.
Exactly. Low financing costs or lots of liquidity aren't enough if demand itself is sagging. The article even quotes Keynes on this.
What did Keynes say?
Something like, recovery requires the revival of both speculative confidence or the state of credit. You need both the means and the belief that investment will pay off because people will buy.
Got it. So what's the main takeaway here? What's the crucial element needed?
The key takeaway is pretty stark.
Yeah.
Investment won't lead an economic revival in a slowdown. It will follow it.
It follows, doesn't lead. That flips the common narrative.
It does. It suggests that just cutting corporate taxes or interest rates isn't a magic bullet if underlying consumer demand is weak. The existence of profits isn't the trigger. The expectation of future profits, driven by demand, is.
So you need something else to kickstart things.
Precisely. You need an exogenous stimulus, as economists say, a push from outside the system. And given that global demand is also slowing, the most important lever, according to this article, is government spending. But not just any spending specifically targeted to generate domestic demand, particularly consumption. It really brings the focus back to the demand side of the equation. How do you get people spending again?
Fascinating. Okay, for our final deep dive today, we're circling back to science, specifically biology, with a really surprising finding. It's about cysteine withdrawal and rapid weight loss, in mice at least.
Ah, yes, amino acids. Takes me back to biochemistry class.
Indeed. We know William Rose's work from the 1930s distinguished essential amino acids, the 9 our body can't make, from non-essential ones. They're all crucial for proteins, health, etc.
Right, the building blocks. So what's the new finding? Well, a recent study in Nature, May 21st, found something pretty unexpected. They took genetically modified mice and removed cysteine from their diet.
Cysteine, but that's a non-essential amino acid, right? Our bodies can usually make it.
Exactly. That's the surprising part. But in these specific mice, removing dietary cysteine led to a dramatic, rapid loss of 30% of their body weight in just 1 week.
30% in a week. From removing a non-essential amino acid. How did that work?
Yeah, here's the clever bit, or the crucial caveat, depending on how you look at it. The researchers got around the non-essential problem by using mice that were genetically engineered so they couldn't produce cysteine naturally.
So for these mice, cysteine effectively became essential.
Precisely. It was essential for them. And when it was taken out of their diet, boom, significant weight loss. They compared it to removing other amino acids, and the effect was specific to cysteine. And importantly, when they put cysteine back in the diet, the mice regained the weight.
Okay, that's methodologically interesting. But what about normal mice? Did it work on them?
No. And this is critical. The effect was only seen in the genetically modified mice that couldn't make their own cysteine, not in normal wild-type mice.
Right. That sounds like a major caveat for any human application.
Absolutely. And experts quoted in the piece, like Dr. Jayashree Gopal, raised several vital points of caution.
Such as?
Well, first, as we just said, in normal humans, our bodies would just make more cysteine if we didn't get enough from our diet. So simply cutting it out wouldn't likely have this dramatic effect.
Okay, the body compensates.
Second, cysteine is actually really important. It's a precursor for glutathione, which is a major antioxidant in our bodies. Messing with cysteine levels could potentially lead to higher oxidative stress, which isn't good.
That sounds risky.
It could be. And third, the obvious point. This was a study in genetically modified mice. Mouse physiology is quite different from human physiology. You can't just assume findings will translate directly. Far from it, usually.
So, despite the dramatic headline finding, we shouldn't be rushing out to cut cysteine, even if we could.
Definitely not. Dr. Gopal sums it up with cautious optimism. She calls it a promising start for understanding fat metabolism better. It opens a new research avenue. But, she stresses, it's still too early to translate the findings into clinical practice. She suggests maybe something could emerge 10 years down the line.
10 years. That puts it in perspective.
It does. And I think the deeper insight here is about how science actually progresses. It's often incremental. You get these intriguing, sometimes startling findings like this one. They're crucial pieces of the puzzle. But it's just one step on a very long, careful journey towards any kind of real-world application or therapy. It's rarely a single giant leap.
A good reminder that science is a marathon, not a sprint.
Okay.
Fascinating stuff across the board today. Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting our Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.